that we need security there, and I really like the work you guys doing. So moving to Fred, you're framing domains as a DeFi. So what's your view? What's the next cycle for this? You see a great adoption. Is there any liquidity fragmentation problem with that? How you're seeing this, Fred?
Yeah, domains have been around for like 35, 40 years. There's already a trusted custodian. You register a domain name, usually it's like GoDaddy or Namecheap. The biggest thing for the domain name industry is trust. So once trust is there, then you can have a lot more DeFi primitives. We're trying to create a whole sector called DomainFi, which is pretty much DeFi for domains. You cannot have that without trust. So trust is critical for any asset, real world or not real world, to come on chain, in our opinion.
That's really cool. No, and then, if you ever bought a domain, to sell it is not straightforward. You have to so imagine you have a tokenized domain, and you could, if you don't want to sell, you could even lend it to someone in a token format. I think it's a very interesting use case. And then moving to Taiko as a L2, and we're seeing a lot of L2s being designed for RWAs now, and there's some big names. But you guys as an infrastructure, how you're seeing this? How you would attract liquidity to Taiko, and what's the kind of the features that your L2 would deliver to get this liquidity?
Yeah. So at Taiko, so first of all, a little bit of like context about Taiko. So we launched in 2024 in May, and we've so far processed over 800 million transactions. Peak time 5 million transactions per day, and we've never had any downtime. And obviously, as a layer 2, we've so far achieved low cost and faster settlement, so sub-second settlement finality on Taiko. So that's some, basic stats so far. And this year, our focus has been on DeFi and RWA because we see ourselves as the infrastructure layer for tokenized finance, meaning that recently, you guys probably have seen it on the news. Like one of the biggest problems for RWAs is regulatory risk. We see regulatory risk not only as just regulations set by different jurisdictions, but at the same time, it's also the infrastructure layer's regulatory risk. What do I mean by that? Is that currently, today's L2s mostly will still have one centralized sequencer to process all of the transactions on chain. And we see that, recently floating on the news that people, or at least big institutions, don't feel safe that their assets are tokenized on a chain that has single points of failure. So with that said, what we've built is a base roll-up structure. It's kind of like a concept came up by Ethereum Foundation's researcher. So we've implemented over the years to have our roll-up being based. What that means is that we're actually not validating blocks on our we're sequencing our blocks on our blockchain, but we utilize the 900,000 validators on Ethereum to process our blocks and sequence our blocks. Therefore, we inherit Ethereum's security and decentralization. So we see that as a truly decentralized solution or scaling solution for Ethereum, and therefore being more regulatory compliant in institutional eyes. With that said, then in today RWA's landscape, we're hoping to have more and more RWA's integrations on chain, and to have to the next step, which is also a technical upgrade called synchronous composability, which means that basically you can deposit USDC on Ethereum and then borrow against RWA collateral sitting on Taiko in one atomic transaction. So with that said, we see that as the ultimate layer for institutional adoption in RWAs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because we're seeing a lot of fragmentation into the L2s, and then jumping straight to Espresso, because Espresso has this super a cool solution that brings faster finality. And what you're seeing, Ben, in terms of adoption, and how do you see the next cycle of this L2s using Espresso as a a speed up process for finality?
Yeah. Well, look, if you create a protocol that deepens people's liquidity, everyone's incentivized to use it, right? If you, it's sort of like Visa, MasterCard for payments, right? If you want to have as broad compatibility as possible, if you're a bank, you connect to Visa, right? DeFi should look different from what we had before DeFi, right? And frankly, it doesn't quite look different yet. It is as fragmented as the world of traditional finance. Just like you have many different exchanges, many different isolated pools of liquidity in traditional finance. You have NASDAQ, you have Shanghai Stock Exchange, you have Hong Kong, right? You have exchanges in India, in Korea. They don't share liquidity. So too, in DeFi, you have liquidity fragmented across many different chains. And the reason is you don't have all DeFi living on one chain. There's no single chain that's scalable enough to host the entire internet of value. There's no single chain that's scalable enough or even customizable enough to host every single platform for digital payments, for digital assets. That's why we all have different chains. You have a chain, right? Exactly. And so what you need is a way for all chains to coexist, but securely communicate with each other in real time. And nobody's quite built a blockchain for that. Ethereum is sort of trying to function like that, but the truth is Ethereum was not designed for many chains to run on top of it. Instead, chains were designed to run on top of it because Ethereum wasn't scalable enough. It was an afterthought for Ethereum. Ethereum is not fast enough to support real-time communication between chains. And so that's why we built Espresso. Espresso is a much faster consensus protocol than Ethereum. It finalized transactions up to 1,000 times faster than Ethereum. And that's what's necessary to unify liquidity and create seamless interoperability. And you can still have an asset bridge to Ethereum while running on Espresso. So we want to support all chains, which are all going to be roll-ups in the future, okay? And we want to support them in not only being able to custody Ether, right, in a trustless way, but also to achieve real-time finality and communicate with each other.
That's very cool vision, and I do believe that's required nowadays. And I kind of align with the roadmap for Ethereum, but moving Ethereum as fast as you guys do, it's more difficult, right?
Yeah, it's aligned with the roadmap of Ethereum. I would say that there's one divide. There is a divide a bit in the Ethereum community between what some people at the foundation envision and what I think other community members envision. I personally don't think of Ethereum as the layer one protocol. I think of Ethereum as a community. I think of it as a collection of protocols, as a mindset, as a vision that unifies a lot of people. And I think the power of Ethereum that allows it to compete with other ecosystems is that it's not a single protocol, and it needs to embrace that, right? And I think that ETH, the asset, can be used to secure other protocols like Espresso, which have already achieved the roadmap of Ethereum. It doesn't need to improve the layer one. It can just embrace the fact that there are other protocols like Taiko, like Espresso, like Parfin, like Optimism Arbitrum. That all is Ethereum. It's beyond the layer one. That's what makes Ethereum so powerful.
Yeah, they're powerful. So now let's go to, I know that this over the last few years, there are some regulatory barriers. There's, a lot of roadblocks for a mass adoption of crypto, of tokenization of assets around the world, right? And for this next cycle to really come and people adopt it, what do you guys think would be required? There's still the last mile. I think that the new administration in US gave a big push with the Genius Act, regulating the stablecoin, because again, the stablecoin is the settlement layer, let's call it, for the whole ecosystem to flourish. But in your view, guys, what's the next frontier? What needs to be done? What's the block that needs to be taken out to this to really get to to the pockets of every one of us. You want to start, Jonathan? Go ahead.
Sure, I could jump on this. I just feel like I'm hogging the mic. So I mean, I think that what's needed is for it to be easy to take any traditional web application, right? Web 2 application. You could take PayPal, you can take Samsung Pay, you can take Line Pay, you can take the NASDAQ exchange, right? You can take any of these things which already are software applications and transform them very easily into Web3 applications. That's what will enable mass adoption. What is happening now is that people think, oh, if I become a Web3 chain, I need to redesign my system as an EVM system, or I need to build some kind of thing that looks like a Web3 thing. And that creates a lot of friction, right? In the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. So it's actually very simple to take any web application, transform it into a chain. You just need to post your data to a base layer, and then you can plug into existing tooling and infra that should be just as compatible with traditional web applications as they are with Web 3 applications. And we've seen that with the proliferation of many chains. The next step, the last mile, in my view, is to get out of the mindset of, oh, we need OP Stack, Arbitrum Stack, or EVM, or this or that or the other. You can just take any web application, post the data to a base layer, prove what you've done with a ZK proof, you're done. It's a Web3 chain, and it can communicate in real time with any other.
Interesting. So you mentioned about Web 2, and Fred is tokenizing the domain. So what's your view, Fred? What needs to be, taken out of the way to move everything on chain?
Actually, we're a Web 1 company. Web 1, I know that's not a very popular word to say over here. I will say that the biggest thing is to find problems that need a solution, not a bunch of solutions looking for a problem. That's common sense to me. Real business models, I think we all agree there's only really two business models in this whole crypto. It's either transaction fees or it's treasuries. And I think the third thing is remove all the technical jargon, right? There's a saying from my Web 1 world, since I'm an old guy, you can either dazzle them with brilliance or, find solutions to real problems, or you can baffle them with bullshit. And I just think there's a lot of bullshit in Web 3. You got to stop that.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm not a critic about many coins, for instance, but there are people that made a lot of money. And again, I don't see a real application, at least from the angle I see. But at Utila, you have real applications, right? But, when you go, I was talking to a client of Utila the other day and say, oh, it abstracts some of my complexity on a day-to-day because they had to concern about the keys and everything, and you kind of create this for every fintech in the world, every website to adopt Utila. What's required?
That's a good question. So I'll start by saying that for us, the way that we look at it is twofold. So for mass adoption, we're looking to the governments and the corporates, right? I've personally now signed up with, we're supporting the Australian government in their in Project Acacia. So that's their CBDC project. And now the Hong Kong government with carbon emissions, right? So those are two specific examples. But beyond that, we're also supporting, because the governments are their hands are tied, as we've rightly talked about regulations, they're going to the small startups to help them with this.
Oh.
And so Utila is supporting both the governments and the corporates, but also the startups that would need us to support those, to support the wallets to be able to custody and to run that business. And so for us, that's where we see ourselves playing, being able to have support for the startups where they would, for example, go out and build their own registry, a tokenization engine that would connect into Utila through APIs, and we would support them from a custody and wallet perspective and security as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. What about you, Adele? What's your view? Which roadblocks needs to be moved away to Taiko to, grow a lot?
Yeah, so I think that actually today's landscape, we already see very positive directions that, in this sort of slight bull market, it's sort of driven by institutional capital or, initiatives. And we see these development of these big institutions not only just want crypto exposure anymore, but actually trying to adopt blockchain into their day-to-day business, whether it's tokenizing RWA or their supply chain assets or private credit assets, etc. So with that said, I see that like tokenization itself is by no means easy, but not the major roadblock, like the bottleneck anymore. But what's more important is actually finding ways for distribution. And this actually goes to what kind of Ben earlier was saying, I believe that about like DeFi's, fragmented liquidity. Like in Web3, we need to get our game together, basically. Like if we don't have these, consolidated liquidity together, I don't see that we have a very thriving, kind of institutional finance on Web3 kind of landscape. But with that said, obviously, retail also needs to participate through, liquidity strategies. So at Taiko, at least we believe that we're not building a layer on top of Ethereum, but we want to see ourselves as an extension to Ethereum by what I just mentioned, the synchronous composability, which is our solution to tackle the fragmented liquidity in addition to Espresso. But I'd love to, work with you actually in our next steps and our next technical upgrade. So with that said, I see a consolidated DeFi or liquidity landscape as a must for next step in RWA development.
Cool. Then let's over the last few years we've seen I think the killer app on the crypto ecosystem has been stablecoins, right? It gained especially on the last few. It gained real application. Stablecoins, started like the on-ramp way for crypto exchanges because they couldn't open accounts in banks, right? Or the ones that open accounts back in the day got accounts closed. They couldn't, do the on-ramp. So the initial use of the stablecoin was, let's represent the dollar in a form of token, so we no longer need a bank. And again, that started with Bitfinex Tether back in the day. And from there, people realized that they could transfer easily for payments. And now has been used for corporate payments, international commerce, and so on. So it's really a killer app. But for this next cycle, what needs to be done? What else? Because again, we're talking about the UX is still bad. Liquidity is still fragmented. What will be the next killer app in your views for the cycle to flourish? Either killer app or infrastructure, because it's kind of, I feel that we're almost there, but what needs to be done?
So I think that there's a bit of a syndrome in Web3 where people are just looking for new, shiny, like sexy things. I don't think you need any new use cases. Blockchains are mainly meant to make finance better. That's a huge use case. If you can make payments work worldwide in a better way, if you can make trading of digital assets work in a better way, you've already achieved the vision of Web3, in my view. And I think that we don't need a lot of other things. Of course, we may find them, but I think that we haven't solved the core boring problems that Web3 was supposed to solve, which is just making payments work everywhere and making trading work everywhere better than it does today. And I think that there are, as you point out, last mile problems to get this to work. Stablecoins are not actually different from any traditional digital asset that's in any banking application, like dollars in Zelle or dollars in PayPal or Yuan in Samsung Pay are stablecoins, the same way that USDC or USDT is a stablecoin. Literally, there's a bank that holds a reserve of something and mints a representative of that in some application. So stablecoins are not different from what we had before. What's different is the fact that these platforms that handle stablecoins have a more secure, faster way of interacting with other applications that are doing the same thing. And that's what we need to lean into, improving the UX, improving the interoperability, making it so that this stuff actually works in a better way than it did before.
Cool. Any other views? Go for it.
I mean, first of all, I was gonna say that I would know. If I know the killer dApp, I would be creating it, not sitting here. So that's first of all. And second, I would say that I do see that whichever type of use cases that would actually drive this mass adoption, which is what we all ultimately want, would be actually that killer dApp. I mean, it's more of a concept than a real thing. I think that I agree with Ben, what Ben was saying. Like everybody wants to chase the next shiny thing, but we still have to keep our ultimate goal in mind is what I think that it driving this mass adoption to actually have whether it's us like using an app like day to day to settle on the blockchain, or whether it's institutions doing that at the back end cross border transactions, if they are able one day to actually compliantly utilize that on the back end to settle all of their transactions, I think that's a win for crypto. So yeah, like that's go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm gonna take a guy I met from Meteora's idea. His name is Marcel Ho, head of business development. I was on a panel a couple hours ago. He thinks that it's a big problem for athletes, since we are talking about RWA athletes, to monetize their brand, their likeness, and to get paid and stuff. So I think that could be a killer solution to a problem that the global world and thousands of athletes might have. Tokenized athletes. I think that's a pretty cool RWA killer app.
So for me, I'm a firm believer of just not reinventing the wheel where the wheel isn't broken. But I think one of the most interesting use cases I've come across is the tokenization of real estate. I do think that it is a huge problem. Like people of our generation can't afford to buy houses. And I've seen now companies that come in to try to tokenize real estate or a house where the down payment is being fronted by a company, and you're, instead of owning 100% of a house, now you're owning 80%, and then paying rental yield, but also a mortgage with a bank. And I think this is solving a real world problem, and I think that's something that could be the next big thing. I think it's hard to pull off because government needs to get involved, the bank needs to get involved, but I think we're slowly inching there, and I think that could be the next big thing, something that actually solves an existing problem. So yeah,
cool. Let's maybe a final remark here for everyone. We're approaching this year went really fast, and we're approaching the end of the year with a lot of movement, especially again in US with a more supportive regulation. And there's this sense of, we're keeping, the crypto market cap pretty stable without much ups and downs, right? But there's this sense of a new cycle coming, and how are you guys preparing for this new cycle? And, what's the view for next year? Maybe we're approaching October already. So what can be done? What your plans for this to, be prepared for the next cycle?
Oh, this falls on me first. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just focused on integrations with Espresso network. We create the most value for the ecosystem, the more chains that are connected to us. So our focus is to basically ignore the markets and just focus on building the most valuable product that we can for the ecosystem. Obviously with the next cycle coming, that's useful in the sense that it brings more builders to the space, it brings more investment to the space. The more attention there is, the more investment there is, the more people understand what blockchains do to transform the world. And so that, that is really essential to this step of mass adoption, because if people look at the space as a casino, they're not going to touch it, right? They have to look at it as a mechanism to improve liquidity and interoperability and security of web applications worldwide. That's what they need to focus on, and it's our burden to make sure that that's the focus.
Yeah, so on our end, I think that cycle is always a macro kind of landscape, which is sort of rising tide lifts all boats. So if there's a bull market coming, that's good for everyone. But at Taiko, at least what we're focusing on is implementing all of the technical upgrades that we earlier mentioned, trying to get to the synchronous composability stage while scaling our ecosystem to have more use cases, have more partnerships with our delay integrations or DeFi to again drive to that ultimate goal of mass adoption.
So the question was, how do you prepare for the next cycle, correct? I think focusing on making money in a trustworthy way, I think all things should solve themselves.
I love your answers, Fred. I think at Utila, so for us, we're a SaaS company, so everything is as stable as possible when it comes to cash flow. But we've just raised money, and I think what we want to focus on, a hunker down, is really on the innovation for our clients. I'm obsessed with pain points. I'm always thinking about that because I recognize that Utila is we're a bottom line. We're a cost center, right? And if we're not helping you make money, then we need to help you save money. And so that is something that we want to keep doing. We want to innovate. We want to make sure that we have features that work for you. So shout out to PEX, who's actually our client. Check them out because they're everything stablecoin. So that's definitely check them out.
Well, I would like to thank you, the panelists. Thank you for coming here, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you all.
Thanks, Marco.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.